All right, we have a pretty robust discussion plan for today, so I'm going to go ahead and get started just for the sake of time. So, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the fourth day of programming for Chezi Connection Week. I'm Dumebi Igbuna. I'm one of the co-founders of Chezi. And for those who don't know us, we are an ERG management software, and we help folks manage and streamline their employee resource groups. This panel is all about preparing your ERG leaders for 2026. And we are joined by some subject matter experts, folks that are in your shoes at various companies. So we have Irelynne, she is from Walker and Dunlop. We have Katie, she is from ServiceNow. Christo from Vital Farms, your favorite eggs, and Wambui from Attentive. To kick it off, I just want to start with an introduction. So I want you all to set the stage. Can you share a bit about the scope of your ERG program, and then how many groups you support, how many leaders you work with, et cetera? Katie, I will start with you and then we can just kind of go around.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's great to see you all and love seeing all the chats where everyone's from and where they work. My name's Katie Kleis. I work at ServiceNow. I've been here for about 5 years as a program manager on our global workforce innovation and culture team. And I've been on that team for about 3 years managing our ERGs. We call them EBGs, employee belonging groups. So there are about 10,000 employees within our 27,000 employee population that are in our ERGs. Again, they're not, I might switch from ERG to EBG, but but we have nine EBGs, 19 global executive sponsors, 14 regional sponsors, and just a little over 140 EBG leaders across our organization.
Nice. Well, boy, what about you?
Yes, I was trying to write down all the things that you asked. Hi, everybody. My name is Wambui. I work at Attentive. We are a marketing, email, and SMS company. If you've ever gotten a text message from a company on anything, it's probably us. In terms of how I support our ERGs, so my official title is Senior Business Partner of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging. Essentially, I help to support our ERG programming as well as DEIB across the company. Right now, we have 10 ERGs that span across all our about 1,100 employees or so. And in total, we have about 500 people throughout the company, so about half that are involved in our groups. And within the leadership cohort, there are about 25 leaders across our 10 groups. So a lot smaller than what you do, Katie. So really interested to hear how you are working on leading that cohort on such a large scale. But yeah, mostly within that kind of late stage startup 1,100 population.
Awesome. Christo, what about you?
Yeah, so hi everyone. Appreciate the shout out for the eggs, by the way. But hi everyone, good to be here. So I'm Christo Abraham. I work for Vital Farms. We're a purpose-driven food company, better known to be selling our eggs and butter. Check them out if you haven't. So I lead our crew impact efforts here at the organization, which are better known as our inclusion efforts for this group. I've been here for a year, actually, so it's been great. It's a great organization. So part of my span of care is managing employee resource groups. So we have eight employee resource groups and around 30 leaders, including executive sponsors as well. And we roughly have around 700 people. But 44% of our remote population is part of a CRG, or at least one CRG, which is fantastic.
Awesome. And we'll end with Erin.
Thank you to maybe. Yes, hi everybody. Irelynne here from Walker and Dunlop. I am a VP on our HR talent team and oversee strategies that promote employee engagement, performance, advancement, and retention. And in my role, I support all 10 of our ERGs and support 50 ERG leaders across those 10 ERGs.
Thank you all for the great introduction. So obviously we're here to talk about preparing your ERG leaders for 2026. And I think to start, I want to just talk about how you all are approaching annual planning for your ERGs. What is your process and how are you involving your ERG leaders in that planning process? Irelynne, I'll actually come back to you to start us off.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So last year we hosted our very first ERG Leadership Summit, and brought all of our ERG chairs and co-chairs together for 2 days of planning. Again, it was our first year, but a huge success that we plan to continue hosting annually. During that first summit, the goal was to share key company updates, introduce new initiatives to our ERG leaders that pertain to our ERGs, and highlight any partnerships that our ERGs might be interested in being exposed to. We also invited a couple of speakers, who maybe was actually one of our speakers, to help guide really the goal setting process for our ERG leaders. Again, this was the first time that they came together in this manner, and so it was important for us to kind of bring them together and talk through the goal setting process for the year. And really, as we plan for future summits, we hope to continue to invite speakers to lead sessions, really focused on expanding kind of the scope of that and focused on helping our ERG leaders grow in their roles and cover topics like, I don't know, influence, leadership development, and navigating change, which I'm sure none of us are unfamiliar with. So.
Well, boy, how are you approaching annual planning as we go into 2026?
Yeah, so a little bit different maybe than folks here, just because this time of year is literally the busiest time for our business. Being a marketing company, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, BFCM is our Super Bowl. It's a really big time of year. We make honestly 30% of our revenue within the next month and a half or so. So annual planning for ERGs is not top of mind. And as I'm sure all of you all know, in order to be a good stakeholder, you need to know when to push and when to pull. And right now I am pulling away and really allowing folks to be able to show up in their full-time roles. So annual planning will look more like in the beginning of next year, where I've been at Attentive for a year. And so when I came, I revamped the ERG program, bringing in clarity on roles, doing elections for the first time, doing an offsite where also do maybe was one of our speakers. It sounds like we all kind of shared a similar playbook. And so this year, or rather 2026, will be the first year where all of that has been in place for about a year. And so into moving in 2026, I plan to keep things relatively the same, where I'm not going to have folks run for their positions over again, but allow people to have a chance to gracefully step down in the beginning of the year, allow folks that want to become leaders to run, and then do that enablement session in Q1 of 2026. That is the time where, as a business, we are ready, excited, energized. And so annual planning for me looks like reflection actually in December. What went well? Where are we improving? Where can we do better? To then set people up in 2026 to figure out, do I want to still be in this role? How do I want to continue to grow? And then from there, I'll plan out what that offsite will look like. And yeah, I really hope moving forward, similar to what you were saying, Irelynne, hopefully I said that correctly, to really hope to reshape ERG leadership so it feels like a value add to all of the leaders in a professional development standpoint. I think I did a good job of kind of redefining what it looks like from a business standpoint and really influencing belonging, inclusion, and diversity metrics. But now, like, why is it important for me to continue to hold on to this seat as an ERG leader? So that's what I'm looking forward to in the next year.
Yeah, I really love what you said around like looking back in order to move forward. I think that's super important. Christo, what about you? How are you approaching annual planning?
Yeah, so we really try to take like kind of collaborative and practical approach to ERG planning. So we make sure our goals tie back to the broader crew impact strategy or inclusion strategy. So our ERGs, they truly act as culture carriers for us, right? Driving inclusion, engagement, and growth across our crew. So professional development, very similar. To me, I think our CRG leaders, they're co-creators. They're not just participants. So I rely truly on them to bring their ideas and leadership forward. I'm just helping guide them and shape how accordingly, right? So to shape what they want their group to focus on and how it can best serve our people. So just like any other department plans for the year, for their year, right out their year, sorry, just like any other departments plan out their year, we've kind of built a simple approach, right? And just making sure there's structure and there's governance. So we just did that this year too. So it's becoming part of our normal rhythm now. So the goal is, right, we work together to set goals, work through those budgets together as well, and figure out what success looks like for the following year. But we leverage our ERG framework, might be a little different, but very similar principles probably across the board, right? So for our framework, it centers on employee engagement, education, communication, and then employee development as well. But very similar to Wambui, what you mentioned as well is we always start with reflection as well. So we can, kind of know where we're going. We can't know where we're going if we don't really take the time to understand where we've been. So looking back at what worked, what didn't, what we learned throughout the year and where we made an impact is always key. But then going into action planning from there as well. So, things like priorities, aligning budgets. So kind of like the administrative things, right? And we do have a leadership retreat, our first ever one, our inaugural one coming up, which the community is also leading to. But we're hoping to take that space to kind of have a dedicated time to turn those ideas into a clear plan. Yeah. So hoping with all of that, right, there's a solid roadmap in place and it can be effective programming for the following year.
Really looking forward to that session. Irelynne, you alluded to this, but obviously the macro environment has shifted. A lot of the folks on the call have experienced layoffs, budget tightening, rebranding even of DEI and ERGs. So how has that influenced how you are planning for the upcoming year, and how do you equip your leaders to, I guess, navigate these changes?
Yes, maybe. It's been a tough year for many in this space. But I would say definitely for our ERGs, they have felt it. And because of that, we have gotten very intentional about where we focus our energy. And so for us at the beginning of the year, what that really looked like was really leaning into connection and communication with our ERGs. And so what that looked like in practice and in action, we added more touch points with our ERG leaders. We brought HR into regular conversations with our ERG leaders and the broader membership. We added some additional listening sessions, specifically with our CEO. And really the idea around the added touch points was really to keep the lines of communication open with our ERG leaders, with the goal of helping them feel supported. I'm sure, like many of you all, I was hearing a lot from our ERG leaders, just they were needing that support, needing the safe space. And so that we just wanted to make sure that they knew that they were not navigating these changes on their own. So really that's what it was about, to maybe that connection and of course communication and ensuring that our ERG leaders were informed of where we were going as an organization. And even when we didn't have all the answers, just kind of bringing them together to kind of hear where they were and what they were experiencing.
Yeah, I think communication is huge with so many changes. ERG leaders might be a little confused on like what their expectations are. How do they balance it with, shifting priorities or responsibilities in their day job? So I love that you've kind of kept that line of communication open, especially with senior leaders, so they know exactly where y'all are going. Katie, you mentioned earlier that you're in the process of onboarding new ERG leaders. I'm really curious, what does onboarding look like for you all? And how do you ensure that they are prepared, especially if they're coming into this role new to ERGs, but just kind of excited about, their community? And then how do you approach smooth handoffs from one leader to the next as far as like succession planning?
I'm muted. Yeah, perfect timing because we're deep in that work right now. But we do a lot for transitioning and onboarding our leaders. Again, there's 140 of them, as you heard. So it's a lot of folks to transition on and off and make sure that they're brought in along in the process, make sure it's clear and concise for all of them. So the former leader will fill out like a transition template guide for them and then also schedule a one-on-one to then, pass over the work, just to make sure they're prepared in this, new role for them. It's not their day job, right?
Yeah.
But during this time, we also send the new and returning leaders. We have a self-paced onboarding course, quick onboarding course, like 20, 30 minutes. Really doesn't take too much time, but it allows us to give folks who may, not learn on or can't join like a call to do it, self-paced. So we did that through our own platform. It's ServiceNow University. And so it shows up in their employee portal. They can see it. They can see how much they've completed. And that way I can also track how much, they've completed in it. And then we also our team hosts a kickoff call to meet with our team, our internal partners. They ask questions during a Q&A, and then we have like fun activities and breakout sessions to get to know them, their teams and their internal partners that they connect with quarterly. And then, yeah, just do a fun meet and greet.
Awesome. I'm really curious, what does that transition template entail? Like, what kind of information is one leader passing on to the next leader?
Yeah, it's similar to, we'll take it as like, here's your roles and responsibilities and what your duties are. Here's the resources that are along with that, any templates or, guidebooks, I guess you could say, which is also in our onboarding course. And then we also connect them directly to that internal partner. So we have like a little bit of information in there as well. And then it really says like what to continue, start, stop, and continue, and really where they can like take that and keep, bringing that transformation to their ERG. We don't want it to stop entirely all that work that the leader might have already done. So
that makes sense. And before I get to the next question, did want to note that we will have Q&A at the end of this. So if you have questions, feel free to drop them either in the chat or the Q&A pop up, and we'll get to them at the end. But speaking of onboarding new leaders, I know a lot of folks have trouble actually getting people to volunteer for these positions. It's obviously a volunteer opportunity on top of your day job. So Christo, I'm really curious, how do you encourage people to step into ERG leadership roles? And do you offer any type of incentives or recognition? And do any of those strategies actually work as far as getting people to volunteer?
Yeah, so I would obviously say pay is the first thing, but I'm not
Right.
going to take an easy answer on that. But I kind of tie it to your growth, right? Like your personal growth and development. I think managing a ERG is very complex. There's a lot to it, just cross collaboration, things like that. So it's very important that once you get into this role, like your skill development is going to grow. So tying it into your personal professional development and having those conversations with your managers, I think is like key. But then also you're playing a huge role from visibility, right? You're getting exposure to senior leaders, you're getting exposure to people that you don't work with on a day-to-day basis. So that's just going to make you even stronger. And then also from a strategy perspective, right? If you're building out the strategy for your CRG, I think that's also really important because that allows you to start building that muscle, right? We usually try to get merging leaders into these roles, especially because it allows them to one-to-one as they continue to grow in their career. They're able to take on this role and not in their day-to-day, right? This isn't specifically tied to their performance to an extent. But just trying to kind of position that to the professional development lens, I would say is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing too, as far as if you can't actually give them a bonus or, a monetary incentive, like positioning it as something that will help with your career advancement and allowing ERG leadership to be a catalyst in that perspective is really key. So obviously not every ERG leader is like turning over. A lot of them have been in the role for either a very long time or maybe you have 2-year limits and they're coming into their second term. But what practices have you found most effective in sustaining the engagement and energy of long-term leaders, especially with burnout being such a hot topic right now? Roles in their day jobs are shifting. They might have personal priorities that they need to focus on. How are you making sure that they're engaged and still excited about the role that they're in? Irelynne, I will start with you.
Yeah, look, I'm continuously learning in this area. So definitely looking forward to hearing some of your other responses. But personally, for me, it really comes down to building relationships with your ERG leaders. I try to make it a point to stay connected with our ERG leaders, whether they're incoming or they've been in the seat for some time. I schedule regular one-on-ones and I am no stranger to rolling up my sleeves when needed and getting in there with them, especially during, hard times like we're experiencing now. And then I think what's most important is just giving them the space to share ideas, even when things get hard, and just kind of being, I guess, if you will, that sparring partner with them, and, coming up with ideas or new ways to approach things. And I think that just really goes a long way, when they feel genuinely supported. Um, so, but curious to hear others' tactics there.
Yeah. Katie, what about you?
Similar. I mean, I think sometimes we do get thrown into some of the work that folks are doing and how to help them. Um, we do regular check-ins, like quarterly check-ins with their internal partners, such as like professional development is with talent development teams. We host an annual summit at the beginning of the year with global coaches and regional leads. And then we also host like a mid-year check-in. We formerly called it a summit, but a mid-year check-in virtually with all of the leaders.
Mhm.
And then we also do what we started doing in the past 2 years now is like a well-being check-in. So we send out a survey, we send them a note with like a video recording of maybe a session we had on burnout. So we always do a dedicated burnout session with them, just to kind of keep their spirits up and the engagement high, especially with folks that have been in it for 2 years. And then we do have that 2-year limit, so they can join another role, which usually kind of excites them to a bit more to take on a new role. And so that helps as well, is kind of that transition for different EBG leaders and new roles.
Yeah. Question for
Yeah.
the overall group. Do y'all have set limits or set like term limits, I guess, for your ERG leads? And I'm curious if you feel like that helps prevent burnout.
We have 2 years on ours too. So it gives them the opportunity. We always check annually, but definitely making sure that at the 2 years, it's like, hey, if you still want to continue, that's
Mhm.
fine. But we just need to figure that out together.
Gotcha.
Oh,
Oh,
you're mute.
yeah.
Yeah, there we go. I don't set limits, but instead give folks an opportunity to step down if they want to at the end of each year. Um, because I see it as if you're enjoying it, it's working for you, you love it, why create turnover? And especially since I'm not doing it at the scale of like someone like Katie, it's not necessarily needed. And I found that to work pretty well so far.
Yeah. I think the overarching theme here is just like checking the pulse of your ERG leaders. Are you still enjoying it? Yes. Okay, good. If not, like where can we maybe make some adjustments to help you enjoy this a little bit better? Christo, was I interrupting you or were you about to say
No,
something?
I
Okay.
was just going to add alongside, so
Yeah.
I'll add one thing, spot on to what everyone else said. I think the other thing too is if you can build out your teams, right? So build out your CRG or your ERG teams, having subcommittees, right? So it kind of splits the work. So you're not over reliant on just a few people. But then, of course, like me and my team, we help coverage, right? So we have to take into consideration the business comes first. So if there are times where people are at capacity, we have to step in, which is kind of the nature of this. So I think that's the other thing I wanted to add.
Yeah, those 2-year check-in points are, in my opinion, incredibly important. We're the same. I mean, it's a suggestion, right? A guidance, but we're not hard fast on the 2 years, but it does give an opportunity to have conversations around, to your point, Christo. What does your leadership team look like at the moment? And are you thinking about succession planning for when you do decide to step down? And it just provides a really good opportunity to just have those very important conversations.
Yeah.
I'll
Awesome.
add one more thing.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No
One
worries.
more thing onto that too is as it relates to succession planning, I think as it, if you have someone that's in a subcommittee role, elevating them to that next role, right? Because I think that's also really important is their growth in this. And also, if you continue to move up in a leadership structure, right, it's more about oversight and strategy than it is execution. So that's kind of helped on our end too.
Many of you have spoken about planning ERG summits or retreats. Some of you for the first time, some of you have kind of done this as an annual thing, and I've been lucky enough to be a part of actually all of them at some point or another. But I'm curious, what do you think is the purpose of these gatherings, and how do they help build the skills of your ERG leads? Katie, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I love our summits, especially the in-person one, right? Like everyone flies out, they meet from all over the world to get there. And so we do strategy planning in November, early November, and then they have a chance to like meet their teams, kind of, get their budget settled and all of that. And then we meet in January for our annual summit. And this is really like that extra boost, I want to say. We dive a little bit deeper into like company-wide strategy for the year, our team strategy and how we can align that with EBG initiatives. They get to know their teams, obviously, because we're in person. We do fun like social hours and things like that. But then we also meet with our executive sponsors. So whether it's in person or sometimes it has to be virtual, depending where they are. We bring in thought leaders just to get them kind of thinking about and revising their strategies for the year. But really, I mean, this year it's all about AI and how the ERG leader can impact that transformation as culture champions. So yeah, it's just a great moment, especially the annual one.
Yeah.
But kind of reminding them too, why we're here, whether
Yeah.
how we really want to be engaging our members, what really is our purpose and our strategic priorities for the year.
Yeah. Well, boy, how do you approach it?
Similar to what you were saying, I've had the pleasure of planning both an in-person and a virtual one. And I really like it to be a moment of, like you were talking about, like excitement and connection, level setting on, again, like connecting their programming work back to the larger strategy. So bringing in external leaders, bringing in leaders in the company. We had a really great session that was like a fireside chat between our head of legal and our chief people officer. And that was actually rated the highest session talking about like the emerging DEI landscape. We had it that our my last session that I planned was in April. And so that was just when all of the new guidance was coming out and there was definitely a feeling of what the heck is going on. And so that was a really rich conversation where I really took it as an opportunity to share with the leaders like I'm navigating this with you all. What
Mm.
can we do and how can we establish a relationship where we are working together to best serve our communities while also knowing that this nuance is the first time any of us are navigating it. And so that was a really great conversation. And so really using that, my guiding principles are using it as an opportunity to use it for strategic planning, thought leadership, professional development, and connection. So, surprise and delight throughout it, gifts, covering fun meals, connection time outside of just actual work stuff. So it's one of my favorite things that I get to be able to do. I don't know if I'll be able to do it in person again, but budget, willing, it would be amazing to have everybody in person. But, virtual, there's definitely ways that you're able to get around that connection piece, but you have to be really intentional about it.
For sure. Christo, I know yours is coming up next month. How are you approaching it?
Yeah, very similar. I mean, I love getting our leaders together just in the same room from a social aspect. But I also see this as the retreat as like a leadership accelerator. It's a way to give back to our ERG leaders, right? It's hard to get dedicated time set aside, so having this time is fantastic, right? We want to pour into them, celebrate their impact, and just remind them how important their work is to our culture, right? Because we get so caught up in like the execution of the programming. It's like, hey, let's have this dedicated time. But I think for us, the two biggest things is strategic planning, of course, going into next year, but then that professional development lens, right? Like Dumavi's going to be there and it's going to be focused on their development, right? Because they are selfless. So they do so much for us as an organization, for their groups. So just making sure that we have that time for them as well. Just making sure they feel seen, appreciated, and supported as well. So alongside with what everyone else said, I think that's the other caveat too.
Yeah. Um, this is kind of going off script, but I'm just curious as you I guess create the strategic plans for your ERG leaders, how are you communicating like the company vision, the company goals, maybe even your ERG program goals to your leaders so that they can incorporate it into their ERG, like individual ERG plans? 'Cause I think that's something that people might, miss out on is like making sure that their ERGs are laddering back up to some of the like overarching company objectives.
I can jump in here. Yeah, and so I time our summit right around, well, again, last year was our first year, so I intentionally timed it to right around the time of year where I knew we would have our overarching company strategy and goals set, and then funnel that down to our human capital GNOs and shared that with our ERG leaders in advance of the summits, and we spent some time kind of talking through the goals and kind of answering some questions as to why and what, some of them
Yeah.
mean, and then a deeper discussion on how ERG leaders can take a look at those GNOs and how they influence a lot of the goals and objectives in building out their own goals and objectives. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Do the rest of you take a similar approach of like having a dedicated time to share company broader goals? Yeah.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
do. Well, in our strategy session as well, if that's ready by then. But then we also host our summit during our employee kickoff, which is when they announce, the broader company strategy. And so that then we can go into a session after that and talk about it and how we want to refine our strategies to match that.
Awesome. All
Yeah,
right.
I'll add just in obviously with the broader strategy, of course, but then the crew impact strategy as a whole too, like how they can fit in. I really want our ERGs to be change agents at the organization to get them more embedded of showing up into the organization. Just if you think about from like a recruiting process, right? Just internal comms, things like that, how we can continue to show up and be a representation for the organization.
Gotcha. This question kind of piggybacks off of that. What role do you like your executive sponsors, HR, or other stakeholders, whether that's like marketing, internal comms, et cetera? What role do they play in preparing your ERG leaders for success, and how are you getting them involved in terms of strategic planning for the upcoming year? Well, boy, I will start with you.
Yeah, this is a interesting one. I feel like it's hard to have something prescriptive, but for this, I'll start with executive sponsors. Executive sponsorship is interesting because it can be just as much or as little as the executive sponsor wants to be involved, right? And one thing that I've noticed is that you really need to play within the lane that the executive sponsor wants to show up as. And also balancing that with what would be advantageous for them. At the end of the day, the executive sponsor job is to be an executive first and foremost. So they are going to be showing up for their org. What I try to do is kind of attach those two things together. Was saying, okay, we have this one executive sponsor. He is known as like the fun, effervescent guy that like everybody listens to at all hands, and he's super great. I'm going to use him for his voice, when something big is happening, when we have a big event coming up, he's the one that I'm going to say, "Hey, I have some comps ready for you. Let's post them. Your voice is going to make a really big impact." I have another executive sponsor. She leads our marketing. I'm like, amazing. Whenever we have an opportunity where a customer is coming in and talking about their story as it relates to maybe like a Black History Month, that's when I'm going to use your voice. And so what I've learned is that it's less of this is what an executive sponsor's role looks like, and really being more prescriptive with it. And that's where, similar to what you were saying, Erlyn and Christo, like getting in the weeds, that's where I see myself getting in the weeds.
Mm.
And then in other cases where you have an executive sponsor a little bit more hands off, I think that's okay as long as you're bringing them in where it counts, right? And I think that's where I see my role is kind of being that advisor of probably don't need to add your executive sponsor to all of your planning meetings, but yeah, at the end of the year, let's talk about what went well and let's see what ideas they might have. Let's tap into their network for a speaker, for a networking opportunity, and being that like liaison, so that when time is on their calendar, they know, okay, this is going to be important. And when it comes to HR, similarly, for me, I always want the ERG leads to feel like they are having true business impact. And
Mhm.
so if I know we just got a new CPO and he's really working on refining how we're viewing our metrics. Great. I want to talk about what metrics is he reporting to the executive team and how are our ERGs helping to support any of those metrics. If it's not supporting right now, that's okay. I don't need to add that onto his calendar. But when it is, I'm sure as hell going to be like, yeah, we should absolutely talk about this intersection here. So it's dynamic for sure. And I think I've learned in this past year, especially, to be okay with operating in that gray, but making sure that when that time is needed, it's really impactful.
Yeah, I love that. And I did a session yesterday around like designing impactful ERG events. And something that we talked through was the 4 Cs and using that as a framework for prioritizing your ERG programming. And the one that I think is underrepresented is commerce. And I think executive sponsors could be a really big unlock for the commerce pillar because they have visibility into maybe company priorities from their different departments that they could maybe take to the ERGs and see where the ERGs could help out. So just something to think about even as you go into annual planning. Katie, I'm curious, how do you involve other stakeholders in your planning process?
Yeah, I feel like I mentioned it a bit, but we do incorporate the executive sponsors in our summit. So we'll make sure that, they have that one-on-one time with their global co-chairs and regional leads, and also just provide input and where they can step in terms of their strategy and say, well, hey, we do this event or we can help out, here or whatever that looks like. And so then we also do our internal stakeholder meetings quarterly, which I know I mentioned too. But those are really connecting us with, the different business functions and seeing like, hey, here's what your strategy is for the year. Like, how can we kind of plug that in or help elevate it or, whatever that looks like for that partner. And so that's really how we're, preparing our leaders for success, is really just making sure that they're connected. It's clear communication and how they're working and what it is that the ERG leaders want to do. Because we also want to overwhelm them, right?
Right.
So we have to be really prescriptive of, hey, here's what your role is, and here's how you can help. And then here's what like our internal partner or executive sponsors is going to do to help you. So
Awesome. Before we get into audience Q&A and quick plug, please put questions in the chat or in the Q&A box. I do want to get an answer from all of you as far as if you could give ERG leaders one piece of advice to carry into 2026, what would it be? Well, boy, I will actually start with you and then we'll go around.
Hmm, that is a good question. Um, I would say and this is going to sound bad, but go to this here, to
Mhm.
stay in your lane of influence. And what I mean by that is it could be so easy to want to, for example, increase representation for a particular community, but ultimately, if the business is not in a place to be expanding hiring, thinking about creating a new, internship program, you may be spinning your wheels to try to create that thing. So where can you influence and where can you really drive impact, and working with your DIB leaders, working with your HR partners on figuring out like what that sweet spot is going, I think is going to be really impactful. Um, Everything does absolutely need to be business aligned, like you're saying, Ty. Can't agree with that more. And sometimes like not knowing where to push the business and where not to, that's where like working with your DIB partner would be really helpful. But make sure again that like you're using your resources and your time, the money that your company is giving you for programs to actually make an influence where you can. So it doesn't necessarily mean sending everybody a gift. Maybe it does mean doing a professional development session with your particular cohort of community that can then influence how people feel about leadership development within your company, which is a business aligned impact, right? So, and I think this year has taught me the importance of getting that clarity and operating and owning that clarity from the business is going to be most important. And it
Yeah,
also helps with burnout as well.
for sure. Christo, what advice would you give leads?
Yeah, taking into consideration just where we are today, just in our environment, I think for me, I've always gotten back to this motto of like lead with purpose, but build durable systems. I think for me, the goal is to build this like a line of business. And this might not just be CRG specific. I think this is just inclusion as a whole. I look at like purpose, it fuels passion. It's obviously what drives the connection, the culture, the belonging of our employees, of our teams, right? But when I look at systems, it's like things like clear governance, consistent processes, measurable goals, right? That's what sustains progress, in my opinion. And it showcases the real impact of our work across the organization. For me, it's like I'm always focused on building this foundation and building it the right way. So then when I'm done, when my time is done, people can pick that up and run with it, right? Because this is going to progress is going to take some time. So I think it's just really important to focus on building structure, building that foundation going forward.
Yeah. Katie, what about you?
Mine's probably similar to Wambui's advice, but protect your peace, especially right now, right? Like protect your peace, but also remember to have fun. Like we get so in it sometimes. We have to remember like their whole role is to build culture and community and create these spaces where people can feel like they belong. So that would be my advice.
Yeah.
You stole mine. That's exactly it. I totally, obviously business impact, right, is incredibly important. But to your point, Katie, I'm always preaching to my ERG leaders, don't forget your why.
Yeah.
And really the why is you are helping to create safe spaces within and embed that in the culture of our organization. And so oftentimes, to your point, Christo, um, you get so wrapped up in the day to day and how are we impacting, and really looking at our goals and objectives and aligning to that. That's all great, obviously, but um, really at the core of it is creating safe spaces for folks across the organization.
Yeah.
And
Love that.
I think for 2026 and beyond, we have to continue to remind ourselves of that.
Yeah, I think that's the perfect way to end. It's been a challenging year for a lot of us on the call. So just that reminder of like what is really important, why are we doing this is to build community, build safe spaces, to your point. All right. So thank you all for that discussion. I do want to move into our audience Q&A. We have a few things in the chat and then in the Q&A button. So I'm going to go through the chat first. There was a question or more of a comment, but I'll make it a question into any tips for planning an annual BRG Leadership Summit? So I know a lot of you are either having them later this year or maybe as we go into next year. What are the things that the folks on the call should keep top of mind as I start to plan those summits or retreats?
I can jump in just high level, like the purpose, like what are you trying to achieve for the retreat? Because I think that will kind of give you all of the answers, right? So it can kind of help you set from a planning perspective. I think the other part that's, I don't want to say it's common sense, but it's definitely something that we might forget about as we're running to kind of get these up and running is just plan in advance as much as you can. I know it might be a little hard because of resources and capacity, but the earlier you plan, the easier it will be on you.
Yes. 100%.
Anyone else? Any other tips to add?
I would say just as having gone through it for the first time last year, don't strive for perfection either. Yes, have a plan, but just be comfortable in knowing that it's not going to be perfect and just go with it. And if your ERG leaders are anything like mine, they will give you feedback and you will be able to continue to iterate in the future. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, couple other questions. First, when annual planning takes place in November, or let's say the year prior, and a summit happens in January, when do ERG events start happening in the year, like Lunar New Year?
I think this one's kind of for me, unless someone else is on the same kind of cycle. That's a great question. We really want to like build on the momentum that the programs did before us, right? And so we're not like rewriting the entire, mission and vision and strategy entirely. Like we'll revise it a bit and see what makes sense for the new year. But planning really like we'll have some planning and then new leaders will transition. There's always events happening, right? All the time. And so there's never really, I guess, a good time to start transitioning and going through all of those leaders. So we'll just transition as we do. They start planning, like we're already planning for Black History Month and Women's History Month now, even though there's new leaders coming in. And so they'll just help kind of gear them up to continue on with that momentum.
I agree with
going
that,
in the
Katie.
new year.
Yes, no, I completely agree with that. And I think that's what I've learned is almost feeling like, okay, I want the new leaders to feel like they're owning it. But it actually, I found to be more helpful for it to be more of a handoff,
Yeah.
as opposed to it feeling like you're scrambling at the end and it doesn't feel intentional, especially with such big events happening with Lunar New Year, Black History Month, Women's History Month. Like the first 3 months of the year for us are busy, right? So yeah, using this time as a handoff more than a net new is I think key.
Yeah.
Awesome. This is a great question. How do you handle leader onboarding that is off cycle? So when someone leaves the org or can no longer participate in the role?
I'm happy to answer this because I've been dealing with this a ton. Attrition, there we go. And I think this is a great example of DEI and business impact coming together. But I have really found that Chezi to be really important. Like, shameless plug, it's been so great for me to be able to, whenever I have a new leader come in, for example, I just had a treasurer lead and we had someone step up and become treasurer in the interim. It's easy for me to hop on a 20-minute call and be like, here's how we use this system. Here's what the budget looks like. If you don't have a Chezi, to your point, Christo, documentation governance is really going to be your hero here. And that makes it super easy. So the handoff is really, really seamless. And it's difficult at first to get it implemented, but once it's there and there's a constant cycle of updating, it has become really easy. So I do quarterly reviews with our budget team on making sure that what's tracked in Chezi is also tracked on our back end on our expense side. I do those readouts with the ERG teams. I call out treasurers that aren't tracking. Like, when they know that they're being held accountable for it, it ends up happening. And then when folks leave, it's really easy for me to either step in the interim or for someone to come in and take up that role pretty easily.
For sure. I appreciate the plug. But if you don't have an ERG software, it's definitely like document, 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 because then it's easier to pass along. All right, we have more and more questions coming in, so I'm going to keep it going. What do you say is the role of ERG sponsors during annual planning? Our sponsor is really hands off, and it's been really hard to level set on expectations.
I'll give a transparent answer. I just roll with the punches. It's just going to depend on the executive sponsor and just react accordingly. So if it's someone that wants to be super involved, you bring them in. If they don't, you just give them the high level and loop them in afterwards, right? I look at our leads specifically to drive the CRG itself, right? Kind of use the executive sponsor for more of a guidance, resources, voice, things like that. So for me, it's like more dependent on the leads than it is executive sponsor. So
Super fair. I would also say I've seen folks implement like an executive sponsor agreement at the top of the executive sponsor's term, just to give them a little more clarity as far as like those expectations. But again, executives get really busy. That can kind of wane off as time goes on. So to Christo's point, you kind of got to roll with it. Okay. How many engagement activities do your ERGs produce on average? Do they connect in any other ways with their members, like a SharePoint or Teams chat or Slack? I know Slack and Teams is a big one for kind of everyone here. So, um,
As a company, there's a ton of ERGs and a ton of people. We've been trying to scale back a bit in terms of events and like really being intentional about what is the impact. Because we don't want to overload our employees. We don't want to overwhelm them with the amount of events and things that they want to participate in. Many people are in multiple, ERGs. So that's one way that we're just way more intentional. And it doesn't always have to be an event. We can still keep people engaged, even if it's a message via Teams or, our employee portal, whatever it is. So
Similar. I mean, we're a way smaller organization, but we try to keep our ERG events mostly to observance months and observance or heritage days. Uh, and similar, Katie, we've tried to kind of, when it comes to communications, kind of reel that in a little bit. And so we're working through kind of some processes there to ensure that, especially communications that are going out to all employees are very intentional and keeping in mind other emails that are critical to the overall organization. Obviously, all that outside of monthly member meetings and things like that. So
Yeah, I think an important message people are pushing right now is quality over quantity.
yes.
Given there are so many ERG leads, a lot of people are remote, they're always on Zoom calls or whatever it may be. Like we just have to make sure that the programming that we are putting out there is really intentional to Ireland's point.
Mhm.
So love that. Any other thoughts on this piece before I go to the next question? Perfect. Okay. So as a peer, how do you approach a leader who is at burnout and loves the org, but is in the mindset of if I'm not here slash I'm not doing it, it won't get done. It will. The other leaders and community members don't have the space to step up because of inability to delegate release control. It looks
Oh,
like
yeah,
thoughts
you're
away.
muted.
Okay.
Yeah. Yes, I am happy to answer this one. This is tough. I think this is where you as a DEIB lead, if this is the seat that you're in, kind of has to lead with coaching. And I think you need to kind of take on that approach where you are saying, you're pointing out how this could be a possible dysfunction of the team and how this need for control and ownership doesn't actually help build the community that you think it is. And this is where going back to your point, Christo, around governance, like setting those really clear expectations at the beginning and saying, hey, your job actually isn't to necessarily drive. So how can we make sure that you're back in the driver's seat? And what can we do? What systems can we create? Where can we go back to our expectations that we set and make sure that we're still meeting them? And where are we not? Like where can we move things around? So it's a tough conversation, and it really starts with taking on that coaching mindset and being honest, especially when it's in a volunteer capacity. Like it's tricky. It's tricky because obviously that person's coming from a good place. But I think when you communicate it in the larger impact of what it's doing to other leaders that want to get involved, that could be a helpful frame.
But I think it also goes back to what I had mentioned earlier about the importance of building relationships with your ERG leaders, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Because if you establish that as a foundation, those conversations should be a lot easier,
Yes.
right? So
Mm,
keeping
Both
that
go hand in hand for sure.
exactly,
100%.
exactly. Hmm.
awesome. Couple other questions. Do any of you have training videos created for ERG leaders, specific recorded trainings or decks for specific positions? I'm considering doing this, but wanted to see if anyone is doing this and have any insight or advice. Katie, I know you mentioned like an onboarding course.
Yes,
I don't know if that
we
includes.
have a course with training videos. It takes you through. It has like questions along the way and um, different, resources that they can fill out and things like that, and decks for the transition and strategy decks. A lot of templates. Um, what else was the other one I was going to mention? Um, I mean, absolutely do it. It's great to have everything documented. Oh, we also have a playbook. That's what I was going to mention. The playbook is like the one-stop shop for everybody to go to be like, okay, what do I need to do in my role? Here's a whole list of all the resources, all the documents. Helps me too keep everything organized. Um, but that's been a game changer in the past few years, just to have a playbook that they can go to and reference.
Yeah, I was just going to say ditto. Playbook, I think, is the way to go as a starting point, at least.
Yeah.
Couple comments in the chat. If y'all are open to sharing those templates or resources, I think the folks on the call would be receptive to those. So maybe I can talk to you offline about getting those shared. Last question I'm seeing. So, do you have membership levels? Do you distinguish a passive member, active, and engaged? If so, what does being an active member and or engaged mean for you? We're trying to define this for tracking and success.
I
We
feel
currently do not. Sorry, Katie.
Yeah,
We
I
currently
was
do
gonna say the
not.
same thing. I feel like I hear this a lot with other ERG program managers, is this is one area where I see a lot of support needed, is just how we are tracking our engagement and
I,
participation, right? So
yeah, I hope there's a platform that can track it.
Oh boy, do you have something to add?
No.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I also think engagement is subjective, right? Like a lot of folks when they think engagement, it's like attending an event, but it could also be like commenting in Slack or your Teams channel or whatever it may be. So I think you might just have to think like how much programming are we doing from like an actual event standpoint? How active are we in those like Teams and Slack channels? What other ways can we engage? And then come up with your own formula. I don't know if y'all would agree with that, but kind of how I look at it. All right. That was the last question I see. Any other questions that pop up before we end the webinar? Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything. Candace, there's a question around the 4 Cs. It's culture, community, career, and commerce. All right. Perfect. Well, Irelynne, Christo, Katie, Wambui, thank you so much for this panel. It was super helpful and insightful to me, and I'm sure it was for the folks on the call. To our audience, thank you for joining on a Thursday. This has been recorded, and I will get you this recording as well as any chat um, responses next week, along with everything else that was presented during Chezi Connection Week. So I appreciate y'all again and have a great rest of your week. Bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.